this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating. I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there, as long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, or Marians and things to episode 124 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. We're on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Jim Henson and Gene Roddenberry.
And what started as a comparison between The Muppet Show and Star Trek, the original series, has expanded.
And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode Wembley and the Gorgs and Next Generation episode Symbiosis.
That's right. But before we get to that, Steve, I want to rock.
Oh, man, am I going to give you one? This is That Rocks. Each week I'm going to tell you about a gem, geode, or otherwise thing you can find under the ground, or maybe even in Fraggle Rock. And this week I've got adamite.
Ooh.
Adamite is often found around zinc deposits. While adamite itself is clear, it fills in the gaps in its structure with other elements, which allows it to be a huge wide range of colors. When iron fills those gaps, it turns yellow. When copper is involved, it oxidizes and they turn a lovely green color. When cobalt gets in there, it turns everything purple and red.
Beautiful.
They don't make great gemstones because they don't cut well. However, they're widely sought by collectors and rock collections all over the world.
Because they probably look cool.
That's right.
Very
so
nice.
That's adamite, and that rocks.
I want to rock!
All right. So what happened this week on Fraggle Rock, Steve?
Oh, man. What's up, Doc? Well, what's that crazy Doc up to? Doc and Sprocket receive another postcard for that Gobo Fraggle character. Just as Gobo is heading to outer space to collect it, Doc receives his own letter. He's been invited to a Tinkers convention, and he's been named Man of the Year.
Oh.
But don't worry, Sprocket's sad, but Mr. Schimmelfinny and his cat Fluffinella are going to help take care of Sprocket. Sprocket is not stoked about this. Sprocket begrudgingly takes his caretakers. Doc returns at the end of the episode. He's received his award, and he gives Sprocket a reward of his own. Dog of the Year.
In a big bone.
Gobo grabs the card and escapes back into Fraggle Rock, breaking Boober's lucky walking stick. Boober complains and complains until Gobo finally agrees to go get him a new one from the Gorgs garden. And somehow Wembley gets roped into going. Junior Gorg is there setting a Fraggle trap, and then his father just pushes a ladder out from under him, trying to injure and kill his son. And then yells at him to plant the damp garden. Wembley and Gobo make a run past Junior Gorg when Wembley is accidentally caught in a pot. Gobo goes back to Fraggle Rock and rallies the Fraggles to go get Wembley, as Wembley sort of befriends the Gorgs. He's smoothing things over, schmoozing the king and queen, saying he worships them. And after dinner, the other Fraggles come and they try to spring Wembley, but they get caught in Junior's trap from earlier. Junior throws them all in the tool shed because they refuse to worship his mom and dad. We then get treated to a rocky, bluesy song about getting back to Fraggle Rock, which is super up-tempo and one of my favorites.
It was good.
To take their mind off of things and how doomed they are, they take time to read Uncle Traveling Matt's card, which I'll talk a little bit about later. The next morning, the Gorgs plan to crush the Fraggles, but they decide to hold a trial instead, and the king and queen and Junior come out donning wigs and robes like they're in royal court. Wembley pleads for the lives of his friends, but in the end, he ends up biting the king on the nose, causing mayhem as the table is tipped and the others escape the chaos. They make it back to Fraggle Rock. Everyone learned a lesson. And that's what's happening in the rock.
Down on Fraggle Rock.
So, John, what did you think of your second ever episode of Fraggle Rock?
They jump into things pretty smoothly, I think, for the second episode. And I think everything's kind of firing on the cylinders we're going to be seeing it firing on already pretty well. I had to admit that one of my favorite quotes was when in the very beginning, Gobo's saying, I'm going to go mosey on over there and get the postcard. And he just splits really fast. And then what's the other guy's name? The one that's
Boober.
Boober. He's just like, that's a very spirited mosey. I just laughed out loud at that line. I love that they now, I don't know if I saw them in the last episode, they have mini copies of the Fraggles for when they're next to a large human figure. And they're like little tiny.
I think they got used in maybe one shot last episode. Oh, yeah. Or 2 shots last episode.
They had a lot in this one. It was really cool. It was cool that they can do that. But also they covered huge issues like freedom and slavery and friendship in this episode. Big ideas. This is our first look at the Gorgs and all 3 of them and their situation and what's going on with them.
And their universe where somehow they're the king and queen of the universe, but they don't have any followers, just their son. Like, that's just great.
And it also brings the question of like, are they in a different dimension that's next to Earth? Like, and is like Fraggle Rock the door to this different dimension that you go through to go from our Earth to theirs? And like, maybe we'll get some answers to those questions later on. Maybe we won't. Maybe it doesn't matter. But it's all interesting questions now. I don't know.
Yeah, like what if the Gorgs are like the giants of ancient tales?
Yeah.
And somehow Fraggle Rock splits the worlds now. And Fraggles are like these little magical sing-songy creatures that they're able to venture between.
And they're like fairies from ancient lore, maybe. Who knows?
And that's why there's only 3 Gorgs, because man killed almost all of them.
Oh, man. That's a dark story I want to see sometime.
See, this is what I hope we get to it. I know we won't, but I hope we do.
And I did like there's a lot of upbeat, cool songs this time around. There's like one slower, nice song, ballad. It was great, but they balanced it out really well with faster songs and bluesy songs. No trash heap this time around, but that's fine.
Yeah, I know that you were a little bit worried about the quality of the songs keeping up. So do you think the quality of the songs has kept up this episode?
It has, which makes me even more worried for them. Because I'm like, you can't keep making them this good, because then how are we going to keep this up?
They've got a lot of good songs. The next episode came on after they like auto played through. And right at the beginning, there was like yet another song I haven't heard in
30 years,
20 years, 25 years. And I still sang most of the songs.
Oh my gosh.
With Red.
So yeah, it's my favorite episode of the season so far. Out of the 2.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. We opened it up a little bit. We got a good idea of what the Uncle Traveling Matt thing is going to feel like basically from here on out. We got a better idea of Wembley and Boober. I like that we got to see Gobo, like the Fraggles ready to go to battle. Like they've got armor.
Yeah, I put on colanders and stuff.
Yeah, they just have those things. Which means the Fraggles have gone to war before. We're just building out this universe.
And I like Wembley a lot. I don't think we saw much of him at all in last episode, if at all. And he's just really cute and adorable. He's agreeing with everyone because he's just happy. Mm-hmm. He's super cute. But no doozers this time. You'd be hard to
have an argument with.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doozers, but well, there's plenty of doozer plot later. You're going to get more of everything.
Oh, and I need to mention, we watched this show called Actually. It's on the Dropout Network thing that we watch. And they had a question about the doozers on there. And basically the premise of that show is they say a statement and you have to guess what's wrong about that statement. And they talked about how the doozers make all these buildings throughout the series of the show. And they always get so frustrated when the Fraggles eat it. And I was like, actually, because I knew at the couch, I'm like, they don't mind when they eat it. They love it. They love it. And I was like, I just found it out.
Also, I think episodes like this are why I don't think we're going to have too much trouble finding similarities between Fraggle Rock and Star Trek as we go from this point, because there's so many, you said messages about freedom and slavery and overseer and like, those sort of things are they're just in this kid's show.
And they're traversing different kind of realms and dimensions and stuff. So it's kind of like, it's a lot there.
So I'm looking forward to more, but you're right. Best episode this season.
Absolutely.
So what are those silly creatures up to? Uncle Traveling Matt observes carefree flying creatures, or as we know them, kites. Believed to be invented sometime in the 5th century in China. They, because not only are there reports as early as 549 that paper kites were used to pass messages during a rescue mission.
Damn.
But they had access to silk cloth, bamboo, and silk string, which were all sort of the strongest materials at the time that were super lightweight. So regionally and what they had access to, it also makes sense. And we do also know that Marco Polo brought stories of kites back from his travels into Europe in the 1300s.
Damn.
And they started sort of as curiosities and fun, but by the 1700s and 1800s, they were being used in science. They were being used in sailing, in navigation to measure distances. But then, unfortunately, with World War II and sort of the evolution of small fighter plane as military, is like easier military, and the large bombers and stuff, kites kind of went.
And we have the famous story of Ben
Kites just
Franklin with
started,
the key on the kite and getting struck by lightning, and that's why we have like electricity and that kind of thing. So
exactly, it was kites were used in science.
Yeah.
So that is what those silly creatures were up to this week.
That's right.
Jarman, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment?
I will say, I think with the introduction, at least a little bit more of the mini-sized Fraggles, there were some great scenes right there with the Gorgs, the Fraggles trapped in the small cage, and then Wembley was in front of the cage, and he was on a green screen as a full-size Fraggle to make him look the same size as the mini Fraggles behind him, and then there was still the big, Gorgs behind. So all that at one point is not just an achievement in the miniatures and the puppetry, but also like the camera tricks and the green screen.
In television making.
Yeah, so like that's easier nowadays, but back then that was not very easy. So I was pretty impressed by that.
I'm going to give it to Fraggle Rock when they're in the cage, all singing together and trying to kind of like break out of their cage. It was such a good number, seeing all four of them playing together.
In that tight little space.
Well, yeah, it was fun. And so I'm going to give it to Fraggle Rock.
Very well worth it. Absolutely.
So, Darwin, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek The Next Generation?
Well, this week we have Symbiosis. So the Enterprise is taking a look at some cool star going crazy with a bunch of flames coming out of it. And they get a distress signal from a nearby freighter. And the freighter is losing its orbit on a nearby planet and is about to crash and burn into it. So the Enterprise crew tries to help them over the space phone, but the crew seems too dumb to understand their own ship to save themselves. And they're barely able to transport them over to the Enterprise before the freighter blows up. But not before they transport a cargo container over first, which is kind of showing that they were valuing this cargo container more than their own lives. And the four people that beam over consist of Tajan and Romus, who are two disheveled Ornarans, and Sobi and Langor, two snooty Breckons. And the Ornorans and Breckons are from two different planets in the system. And we learned the Ornarans are suffering from a plague, and that the Breckons have the only treatment for the plague on their planet, this thing called Felicium. But they won't give it to the Ornarans for free. And the Ornarans were about to buy this cargo container full of Felicium from them, but the payment just blew up with the freighter. So now they're kind of screwed. Meanwhile, we find out that the two Ornarans on board are actually currently infected with this plague. So Dr. Crusher examines them, but can't find any sign of contagion or a virus. Just these terrible symptoms are starting to exhibit. So Picard tries to convince the Breckons to have a heart and just give the Ornarans the Felicium for free. But they tell him that the two planets are completely dependent on one another, and that the Felicium is the only industry on Brekka, and their only source of income is selling the Felicium to the Ornarans to treat their plague, but doesn't actually cure them. It just treats the plague over time. So Picard has to admit that he can't directly interfere, or that would be breaking the Prime Directive. But as the Ornarans and the Enterprise start to tweak out even more and get more sick, it seems, he's able to convince the Breckons to at least give the two of them a dose of Felicium so it can help them for now. And Dr. Crusher watches them take the Felicium and realizes that they react to it just like they would some drugs like opium or some kind of heroin, that kind of thing. They all get all happy. So they confront the Breckons about this, and with some help from Data doing some extra research, they find out that 200 years ago, the Ornarans had a real plague that was actually cured by the Felicium, but it was also highly addictive. So since then, the Breckons have been fooling the Ornarans into believing they still had the plague, so then they had to continually treat it with the Felicium and keep buying it from them. But Picard can't tell the Ornarans any of this because of the Prime Directive, but he allows the Breckons to send down the Felicium cargo for free because they want to keep them addicted. But at the same time, he now refuses to help the Ornarans fix the remaining cargo ships they have, which means that after this point, they won't have the means to transport any more of the Felicium from Brekka. So now at this point, all the Ornarans will eventually go through painful withdrawals. Some will die, but eventually they will be free from the addiction, much all to the chagrin of Dr. Crusher, who thinks this is all terrible, but Picard's hands are tied, supposedly. So it's a lot going on, a lot of politics and things happening there. But Steve, what do you think of this episode?
Okay, some things I liked. I loved the distress call, just the whole them being like dumb yokel captain and crew.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, we don't know how to do that. It felt, though later it did feel out of place because they didn't really play that way the rest.
Yeah, that was odd. They seemed like idiots at first, and then they weren't.
It was an early hard sell, and I don't know why they sold it that hard at first because they pulled back. I loved the great addition of them saving the cargo instead of the crew. It added another level of mystery that typically these don't have. They typically just jump to it. And in addition to that, I support on they finally slow played the reveal, which good for you, Star Trek. You finally did it. Where the symbiotic relationship was too convenient. We knew it, Crusher knew it, but we didn't know why. And the episode didn't immediately tip its hand to the why, which I was proud of. Normally they immediately tip that shit.
People acting really suspicious, like right off the bat, basically.
Had her biggest role in many episodes, and she has definitely done drugs. Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I also like that Jean-Luc called the guy's bluff on murdering Riker. Mm-hmm. It was a nice human kind of moment that didn't just result in escalation, which is pretty typical. Some things I struggled with a bit. There was that really terrible after school special vibe that took over for about 2 minutes right in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Really bummed me out.
Drugs are bad, okay?
Really bummed me out. It was really too convenient that these two, in theory, traitors, not bigwigs in the government, not presidents of this thing, happen to know the planet's biggest secret. There is no reason that would be just like a known thing.
Because it makes you wonder, they were selling
They
were selling a huge amount of Felicium, so it's possible they could have been high level, but you're right, they never mentioned that these are high level people.
Right.
We don't know. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, they're random space traders.
Yeah.
And so there was that aspect of like, why do they know this biggest secret? Why do they have no skills to like lie about it if they've literally been lying to these other people
for 200 years? Yeah.
For forever. And that means that every single person on their planet's in on it. And that's hard. Like, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
It would be a government deep secret that only a few people would know. And why the fuck would it be these two?
That makes sense.
And then Gates McFadden, her acting in the beginning was really great. Her objection, we got to see her stretch and push against Picard a little bit, which we really haven't gotten to see, at least not to this extent. Later on, she went so far overboard that I couldn't stay with her. At the end, she just came off sort of as like a petulant teenager.
Yeah, it's like over the top kind of acting.
But the beginning was so good, it made me go, oh no, Gates, pull it back a little, just a little.
Which is good because friend of the show, Paul Wright, he's from an early time has always said that Gates McFadden's acting was way too wooden. And I think this episode, she was the opposite of wooden. She was just going all for it, you know?
over it. Yeah, she just went over by a little bit.
Yeah, I could see
but
that.
overall, it was an okay episode.
Yeah, I think besides the heavy-handedness of the anti-drug message, I kind of like the episode. I like you said, the reveals and what's going on with these people. It's a mystery, and we get to see Picard as a diplomat and a negotiator a little bit, and it highlights the values of Starfleet, the Prime Directive, but we know that they break those all the time, so it's kind of like, why didn't they just break it this time?
Yeah, why was this the big thing?
Yeah. And they also some good ensemble moments, which you said, like Dr. Crusher was there, but I think the guest stars were very good actors. I think they all did a very good job playing their parts. I think they had some confusing direction. Like you said, they're played really dumb at first, but then that just gets thrown away later on.
Overly dumb at first.
Yeah, I was like, that was funny too. It was interesting because I love seeing Picard's reaction. He's like, why don't they know how to work their own ship? Like, what the hell are they doing? Do you want us to beam you over? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's great.
It was really funny, and I was like, oh, I hope they keep doing that, and they didn't. Right. But yeah, I think because of all that, I think it's pretty solid middle episode, but nothing more than that. It wasn't crappy. It was just kind of like some missteps here and there, but yeah, especially the anti-drug stuff. But
the whole thing was an anti-drug thing. I don't know why they felt the need to add in like, Tasha, why would someone do drugs? Like, I was like, no. Stop. This whole thing is an anti-drug thing. Why did we need to do this, guys?
Yeah, you only hit us over the head with it. So, some actually interesting Trek facts about this episode. Merrick Buttrick, unfortunate name, who played Tijan, and Judson Scott, who played Sobe, they both appeared in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, as pretty big roles. Respectively, Merrick Buttrick was Kirk's son, David, which I knew I recognized him. I couldn't figure it out where, but he plays Kirk's son in that movie. And then Khan's right-hand man, Joaquim, was the rich, snooty guy in this episode. He was Khan's right-hand guy. He has a few lines in Wrath of Khan. So it's weird that two people from Wrath of Khan were in this episode. The visual effect of the fluctuating force field around the Enterprise D while it's near the star when it's getting affected by the star's rays, was created by using a bowling ball, which was trickled with salt, is the phrase they used. And the salt bumping off the bowling ball in some kind of lighting was used, and then they squeezed that image to make it fit around the Enterprise and turned it upside down. And that's how they made the effect. I'm like, how did they come up with this shit? I have no idea. The makeup of the Onarans, where they had that thing on their nose, was the basis for the makeup of Bajorans later on when Bajorans come around, when Ensign Ro eventually is on the show. And that's where they got it from, because we never see these races again, ever. The Felicium grains that we see them picking out of the big cargo container are actually just red lentils, like from the store. And the dispenser for them, for the Felicium, is part of an automobile alternator from like a car. The episode was, of course, an indictment of illegal drug addiction, especially given the country's mood at the time, with President Ronald Reagan's anti-drug efforts in full swing, and other programs like the DARE program that Steve and I, of course, took part in school. They were becoming very prominent at the time. And the episode was almost prophetic in that some drug cartels evolved a corporate structure and acted more like businessmen than criminals at the expense of drug users pretty much around this time. The episode was influenced by co-executive producer Maurice Hurley's recent work on Miami Vice. So he took his work on Miami Vice and took it to this episode. And it was intended to have the Enterprise come across a drug deal in progress. And Hurley was also responsible for the insertion of a Just Say No style drug speech by Tasha Yar to Wesley Crusher, which came over the objections of the cast. The cast did not want to do that scene at all. And they're just like, no, you're putting it in. We want that anti-drug message in there. And what's really funny, this last one, that discussion between Tasha and Wesley was the only time in the entire series that the two characters have a conversation. Which I was like, I did not realize that. I had to think back. I'm like, I don't see that at all.
She's gone not too long after this, right?
Yeah.
We only have a couple episodes left with her, right?
It's the next one. Ew. So that's her only conversation she has with Wesley is about drugs.
Oh, good. Well, good. It sounds like she had a real fun time with those drugs.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But any connections here between these Treks people and the Muppet people?
Oh, boy. Judson Scott, who played Sobe, had a small role in Blade, which featured Chris Christopherson, who was a Muppet Show guest. Merrick Buttrick played Tejan, was in a TV movie called When the Bow Breaks, featuring Ted Danson, who starred in Jim Henson Creature Shop's production, Gulliver's Travels.
The two guys who were in Con were also in the connections. I like that.
That's right. And then Richard Linebeck played Romus, that character. He was in the movie Ready to Rumble. He's also a working actor that's been in a ton of stuff. In Ready to Rumble was David Arquette, who played both Dr. Tucker in Muppets from Space and the angel Daniel in It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie.
Wow. He was in two things. I didn't realize that. David Arquette.
Right. Arquette, pulling it down.
There's some impressive connections.
Well, it makes sense they're so connected because they're so similar.
These episodes are very similar. Tell us, Steve.
Both feature an unequal exchange between two races where one thinks it's better than the other. The Gorgs and the Fraggles and the two nose aliens whose names I've already forgotten.
Absolutely. Both episodes do address the matter of freedom in a way. The Gorgs and Fraggles more directly, when the Fraggles would be kept as slaves by the Gorgs. And then the Onarans they'd rather keep up their trade with the Brekka to get their drugs than learn how to innovate or do anything else on their own in their own free kind of way.
Both feature people seemingly changing to be better people, but really have ulterior motives. Sobe and Langor giving the drugs to keep up the addiction, and Ma and Pa Gorg telling Junior to spare Wembley because they loved how he worshipped them.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Both have a character desperate to get something, and they finally get it. Junior Gorg finally capturing a Fraggle, and the Onarans finally getting their Felicium drugs.
Both feature people using their natural defenses, the aliens and their electric grips, and the Fraggles biting with their sharp teeth against the Gorgs.
Fraggles are ferocious creatures.
Did they Fraggles bit two people?
That's true. They're dangerous.
Episode.
Don't pick up any Fraggles.
No wonder.
Oh gosh, what's that noise?
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
All right, so part of the show, we transport one character from one episode to the other, and then vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
Rock to Trek, I'm going to bring over Junior Gorg and replace the hillbilly yokel, one of the two. It doesn't matter. Just being too dumb to fix his own stuff and needing his narcotics. Oh, Mommy, Daddy, I caught a spaceship.
Mine's similar. I have from Fraggle Rock to Trek, I have the Gorgs, just all three of them, to take the place of the drug-addicted Ornarans, because it would just be fun to see the havoc the Gorgs would cause when they're going through withdrawals and taking drugs and shit.
Trek to the Rock, I'm bringing over Beverly Crusher to replace Boober, as she was sort of the worrywart this episode.
That's true.
But she ended up being totally right. So that's something.
Sometimes Boober's probably right, too.
Oh, yeah.
Trek to Fraggle Rock, I'm having Wesley Crusher take the place of Wembley, because he has that same childlike innocence as Wembley has and would try to make the Gorgs happy. But in the end, he had the same sense of justice that Wembley had in the end there.
That's fair.
Cute. All right. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of the episode 124 of the MuppeTrek Podcast, guys.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode Let the Water Run.
And Next Generation episode Skin of Evil.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.